First, you have to have the technical competence, but to be able to confidently deliver that, you've got to be able to put your voice out there. And everyone said, oh, engineers are engineers. They should just stay doing the numbers and doing the calcs and doing the designs. It's not their job to sell. And I want to challenge that. The role of the engineer has to do all of it. You have to be able to sell your ideas. Otherwise, as an industry, we won't be able to move forward with technological innovation or inventions or anything that's going to move the dial for our future. So very excited today. We've got Terri Reid on the podcast. But to flip the script, Terri's actually going to interview me. We're going to have a robust discussion around engineers, entrepreneurs, and what the combination of an entrepreneurial engineer looks like, among many other things. And I'm super excited to get into it. So Terri Reid, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. And I can't wait to dive in.
Yeah, awesome. Me too. Thank you for allowing yourself to be in the hot seat today. Very brave of you.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, look, we both know that, and you are a professional coach. You do have a role to talk to people all day, every day, I'm sure. And I think it's nice sometimes to not just interview, but be interviewed. And I think as well, it keeps things fresh and live. And it also, I think, as I mentioned, it gives me a chance to, really just speak my mind and maybe open up more conversations. So yeah, thank you again.
Awesome. No, delighted to be with you today. We worked together, I don't know when it was, a year or two ago. I'm doing some work for you personally on professional capacity and then also with your team. And so maybe we could start there in terms of you're obviously, and ever since I met you a few years ago, you've been very passionate about mentoring the next generation of engineers. What led you to that in the first instance, and did you have that experience when you were a younger engineer?
Yeah, I was very fortunate to find mentors as a young engineer. I seem to gravitate towards, a couple of different leaders throughout the early times in my career. Those mentors I could rely on, I trusted them, and I learned a lot from them, both technically and non-technical. I think as well, I find it so difficult, and maybe because of, times changing, environments changing, how people learn is changing. Because I remember, I had a mentor I used to write letters for, and I'd write the letter, I'd have to type it out, print it. It had to go with another sheet that was like an authorization. They would review that letter in red pen. In hard copy, I'd get that back. I'd have to retype the letter out. And slowly over time, it got to the point where my goal was to hand that director a letter without any red pen. That was my goal. If I could get a letter back that was just a big tick at the box at the bottom with a well done, that was my goal. Where, now something like that is not going to happen. You've got track changes, comments in documents. It's very rare that you'll find someone will do a hand markup on your written word. So I think that's changing. And also to even reflect on that story in particular, but that was the person who pushed me to pick up the phone and to talk to people. So I think what I'm trying to do, and you mentioned I am passionate about it, but to take some of those learnings that I had with the mentors and very fortunate, amazing mentors that I had, and try to package up some of those learnings and pass them on to younger engineers, not just within my company, but also others. And to do that, yes, it's amazing. Having these conversations, I hope people get something out of it. But I think with mentoring or coaching, like, to see someone go from X to Y or A to B, to see their change in behavior, sometimes to see the penny drop or that light bulb moment, or to see them grow or become more mature or more technically proficient as an engineer. That in itself is the most amazing thing to see. And that's why I think I do it, because it's so rewarding to see the change that you could have on someone's career and life.
Mm. And which is a wonderful thing that we can provide or offer to people that we're mentoring. How have you been influenced by your, I'm going to use the word mentees. I don't know if you've heard that term before, but the people
Yep.
you mentored, what are some of the things you've learned from them?
Yeah, I love that.
Two way, isn't it? It's not just I'm so awesome because I've been around the traps. We can learn from everyone we meet.
Yeah, I'm a very well, I won't say cryptic. I'm very fast paced. I do work very fast. I will take on as much as my brain can handle. And I'm very short, in particular on email. I'm very short on email. I always have been. And one of my mentees sort of said, I don't know what you mean, or I don't know what you're talking about. Or, you know, this particular sentence, like, what do you really want? So I've actually learned to be prescriptive, because how I was taught when I was young was you just go figure it out. Here's a problem, go figure it out. You had to research, ring people. Now obviously you've got AI and whatever, but then I had to ring people until I found someone that had the answer. I just keep ringing and ringing and ringing. So now what I've learned to do is be a little bit more prescriptive. I provide hints or guidance, which sort of says, here's where you need to go, or here's some context. And I think context is very important. And I know that. But there's part of me that wants the mentee to figure it out for themselves. And I think there's learning and there's a journey in that itself. The other thing it's helped me do is that I've learned to slow down. And when I say slow down, it's probably more about being wholly present within every moment. And it's forced me to probably take stock, understand more, slow down, provide more detail, more context, give that upfront guidance to then go and then come back to me, not go and figure it out. Because I think sometimes that can be quite blunt. And I think, younger engineers particularly, and it is usually soft skills, or as I always call them, power skills. Soft has a bad name or a bad rap. But the other thing is, it is technical proficiency. And I see a lot that younger mentees will be like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. But in actual fact, it's, I don't know, because they don't want to be seen to not know. So breaking those barriers has been the other thing that I'm learning more about, because there is a very much I won't, not so much an age difference, but it's really a generational difference about how engineers speak, how they learn, and now trying to navigate that into a different generation. That's probably been some of my biggest learnings from the mentees that I've had.
So, how would you say that it's changed in terms of the way they communicate, the younger generation?
Yeah, so well, I mean, I don't want to sound old, but when
But you
I talk,
are.
but when I
We're
talk,
not as old as me, so that's so you're okay.
no, but this isn't about, oh, back in my day or anything like that. This is about very clearly the story that I mentioned about the letter. That's what you did. It was like a 5-page copy. The letter actually got sent in the mail. Then it progressively got faxed, and then it was an email. So I found that the communication channels have changed. And what I haven't seen is a real pickup in formal language and grammar and summaries and logical and technical arguments, and the use of logic and engineering to provide a fundamental basis for a position, or a debate on a technical matter. And I've just seen that that's been slowly eroded by the fact that we have so many channels, from like WhatsApp, text, Teams, Slack, email, and you're just seeing all of this communication but there's no and limited whiteboard sessions or markups by hand or sketches by hand on a pad or a drawing on, you know, on the back of an envelope, how to build something. And you do see it from time to time, but it's about seeing that come through more in the younger generation, and I'm very big on that. I think the other thing too is, you know, everyone used the word keyboard warrior, and I, you know, particularly, you know, with our undergrads, is about getting them to pick up the phone and ring people. You know, you got to ring one person a day. Like that's the rule. You got to ring someone a day, one person per day, even if it's me or someone else. You have to ring them to talk about a project, whatever it is. You got to prepare for the call. You got to write your notes. You got to know your stuff, and you have to make a phone call because, you know, it's so easy to write a million emails. You know, it's so easy just to punch out the emails, job done. But I've found that that communication piece, that verbal communication piece, is so important as engineers to be able to deliver the messages that we need to change, influence, or design and build something. So I'm really seeing that a lot, because it's those interpersonal skills. If you first you have to have the technical competence, but to be able to confidently deliver that, you've got to be able to put your voice out there and project, and you got to sell an idea, right? I mean, that's the role of an engineer, is to sell it. Someone made a comment, I can't remember, on one of my posts, and it was something like about, oh, you know, so what you're saying is you've got to figure out the technical bit, and then you've got to do your business development, and then you've got to sell it. And I'm like, 100%. You know, engineers, and everyone said, oh, engineers are engineers. They should just stay doing the numbers and doing the calcs and doing the designs. It's not their job to sell. And I want to challenge that. I think it's really the role of the engineer has to do all of it. You have to be able to sell your ideas. Otherwise, as an industry, we won't be able to move forward with technological innovation or inventions or anything that's going to move the dial for our future.
Here's something that popped into my head as you were speaking, which is that
I talk too much, sorry.
No, you're bracing yourself for this. Don't apologize for expressing, it's important. You know, a lot of people think that communication is about talking and how we express ourselves, which obviously it is, that's part of it. But I haven't heard anything so far about listening skills. We talked about the soft skills.
Yep.
What about our ability as engineers or other professionals? As you know, my specialty is working with smart professionals who are prized for their technical capability. And I spend so much time helping them learn how to listen, observe, and respond. How about you? Can you talk to that? And actually, so before I do that, and actually understanding the client's needs.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'm really when I talked about communication and picking up the phone and having that verbal communication, yes, it's not just a one-way street, it is two-way. You know, there's a quote about, you know, listening to people who listen to respond or people who listen to understand, and understanding the problem is the first part of the problem, right? You have to understand the problem. Often talk about, you know, what are the client's needs? What is best for project? I've had so many projects where we've come up with something to save the project, you know, in our mind, $1 million, but the client doesn't care because, say, the debt is costing them $800,000 a day or a week or whatever. So the delay to save the money actually isn't worthwhile. Listening is very important, obviously. That, I think, in my mind, comes back to problem definition. What is the problem? And listening to understand the problem. But then the other thing that's really important is gathering all of the different ideas and the diverse solutions and trying to take in all that data. But I think the other thing is that engineers have become more and more multidisciplinary. So it's not just about the flooding or the road design. Now it's become about the biodiversity offsets or the, you know, heritage impacts or the authority's requirements or the planning requirements, the layers and layers and layers of constraints and risks and opportunities. And that broad understanding of those and listening to those stakeholders, is super critical. Look, when I talk about communication, I'm saying that the verbal and listening, that part of it is not on email. I'm sort of saying that it's the conversations that I find can move the needle. I mean, I've never felt like we've come up with all the amazing ideas that really move the needle with back and forth emails. It's usually in a boardroom with a whiteboard, with a pen and some paper, or a sketch or an idea, when people are interacting, talking to each other. I think that was the point I was trying to make.
100%. I agree. I was just drawing that out of you because
Oh
some
yeah.
people, I know that you know this, but there are some people who might not be fully cognizant of that or aware of that yet. So especially, because I think at uni we're often trained, we're often, I don't know about it was like in your degree, but there's not a lot of the soft skills, if you like, that's taught. I studied accounting years ago at university. Certainly wasn't any training in that department at all. And, we can easily get the wrong end of the stick, if you like, or dismiss people's perspectives if we don't listen. And I think it's more than listening. It's also about the ability to draw out people's insights and then synthesize the information, which is essentially what you're saying, the ability to collaborate with lots of different professionals across all of the different disciplines and get people on the same page. Like, how would you fast track that skill if you're a young engineer?
Yeah. The thing that comes to mind, and I'll maybe talk through this and then I'll move to the fast tracking part. But I think when and I think listening, gathering data and information to solve a complex or wicked problem, and the stakeholders in the room and their requirements and what they need, to understand the personalities, to understand their drivers, like why do they need this? Why? And ask why. Why do you need that? Why do you need that offset? Why do you need this? To really dig deep into the why. That would be an easy way to fast track, because if you're a young engineer, a young professional, and someone says, this is why it is, you say, why? Oh, because of this. Why? Oh, because this standard says so. But why? And just keep pushing with the why. I know you might sound like a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old child, but to get to that very root of the why would be the first thing that I do to try and fast track that. Because I always talk about deep diving. And if you can deep dive into something while you're doing it, so I say about diving into the job, dive into the project, dive into the detail, but then come back out of it. So if you've got, and we got things like requests for information, right? RFIs. And I'm like, dive into the RFI, dive right in, figure it out all the way to the bottom, but then come back up and then manage all of them, right? So to deep dive into those things in and out, and ask why, I think would help fast track. But then I think the other thing is that you've got to understand those drivers and motivations. And I think you'll find, and what I've found is that instead of coming up with the ideas, it's usually a better idea, mind the pun, to almost craft the scenario around the idea and let someone else figure it out and put it out there. It's like that whole, leading horse to a water thing. Like, if you can frame the narrative about what or where or how, or at least make a suggestion. I think that's the other thing where, as a young engineer, and I see it all the time, and it's amazing where you'll be talking and someone will be like, oh, why do we do that? And I'm like, you know what? That's actually a really good, what? And then they'll say, but what about this? And you're like, why didn't we think of that? We should have had a really good look at that thing. So asking questions, definitely. Not being afraid to ask questions. And I think that comes back to that confidence part. And asking why. I think that would be the most powerful way to leverage and suggest, because a lot of the time, you're right, people, depending on their personality type, and I know I talk too much. I know a lot of people that are very firm with we're going to do this, and you're like, instead of saying, no, it should be this, you say, oh, can I make a suggestion? Or, hey, yeah, that's a great idea, but why this bit? And just find something that's not doesn't sit quite well. Yeah, I think that would be a good way to go.
Mm.
36% of listeners won't subscribe to this podcast, and that's a real shame. If you want to help me share the stories and help others learn and grow, then please like and subscribe.
Have you ever had pushback when people you've asked why?
Me,
And
have I had pushback from me asking why?
No. If you've asked why, you're a young engineer, you've plucked up the courage to ask why. The person, the old dog, not you necessarily, but someone who's been around for a while.
Yep.
Who is this upstart? Asking why? Who do they think they are? Blah, 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 which is probably
Yep.
going on
100%.
potentially for the young engineer in the first instance. They've plucked up the courage, bam, they get pushback.
Yep. Damn straight.
What happens next?
You basically you cop it, you make a note of it, and if it happens more than 3 or 4 times, you're working with the wrong manager.
May I offer another option?
Well, I think I mean I've had it before. That's what we've always done, or that's what the standard says, or what do you know about this particular component? It's this because that's what the standard says. That in my mind is, would be very demeaning, and even being in those sort of situations. But I'd be very happy to hear your alternative suggestion, because for me, I'd be like, well, you know what? If I'm working with someone who does that to me in an open forum, I would not want to work with that person.
Yeah. This is just like, what do you think, if that person was responding in that way, what do you think might be going on for them? Why would they push back like that, do you think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, under stress, maybe it's their personality type. They don't want to be undermined, of course,
Maybe they feel threatened because they might have this facade of having it all together, and they've got this young junior engineer who's absolutely awesome coming in, and they're like, what value am I if this person who doesn't have a truckload of experience is coming in pointing out some, inconsistencies or whatever the issue might be.
Yep.
A thing that I have learned in my coaching background is the way we ask why really matters. And because I am innately curious and ask why all of the time, as does my daughter, who's now 20. When she was 2, literally she would ask why probably about 20 times a minute because she was curious. That was, anyway. Asking the question, it's a why question, but asking it in a different way can actually help people go a bit deeper with their response. So when we ask a question, or why do we do this, often people will instantly go to justify or defend their position. It's just a natural reaction, an instinct to do that if we're not completely open and ready for, challenge. So to ask a why question starting with the word what. Oh, what's leading us to do this? Or, so it's still a why question, but it actually supports people going to a deeper level in their response as well. So they're not going to that justification. So either a what or a how question by asking why can help. The what questions tend to go a lot deeper.
I like that.
So still why, but just going about it in a different way.
Yeah. One of the things I say to all of young engineers is challenge me. Like, I am here to be challenged.
Yeah.
I'd love to be proven wrong, like not even wrong, but even different. I think that our environments need to be open, diverse, have multiple different avenues, angles, thoughts, and in my view, that the more diverse with old, young, say different types of engineering, um, I think the more broad that is, I think you get a better outcome because of the diverse angles of experience you could throw at something.
Mm. Yeah, I always think of us on the planet as a diamond. Like we've each got an angle.
Mm.
One has the same angle that you have, or the same angle that I have. So there's like, let's call it 8 billion people on the planet. If you don't bring your angle, nobody else on the planet can bring that. So we're like a multifaceted diamond, and we are not going to sparkle as brilliantly if some of those angles are not being shown or expressed or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing that's really important for the younger generations is it's so important to have an opinion, to have an opinion or to have a position.
Is it an opinion or a position? I'm challenging here, or is it a perspective?
It's all of the above.
Mm.
And that's one thing I really try to get out of people a lot is like, what would you do? Or what do you think? Or how would you approach this problem? And it gets not just people to think, but you get to people to have that angle because, I always say that if you don't have that ability to have an angle, and I'm not saying be loud or, like I said, burst into a meeting and be like, this is my position. Like I'm not, and I know there's a lot of people who they'll just sit back and they won't say anything. And then they might have their position in some other way or some other forum, or they might go walk down the street with someone in a coffee and say, oh yeah, I was in that meeting, but hey, by the way, I was thinking about this, and that's their position. I think it's really important to have, and I know I use the word opinion, perspective, position. I, I know they're slightly different, and the nuance of the difference is probably important in this conversation, but I would like always to think that if someone says, oh, I like blue cars, and you go, okay, that's great, right? But it's important to know that that's what that person likes or that's what they believe in. And it's maybe a belief thing. I don't know. I think it's just so important for people to have perspectives on many things and maybe not any on other things. And I mean that by, because there's a lot of people who just go, I don't have a really an opinion on that. I don't really have a perspective on that. And that's fine. But I think it's also very important, particularly in the engineering world, is that if you have experience or you have a position or this is what you believe, then stand up for that belief and put it out there. Because if you don't, that might be something that, might save someone's life. You just don't know.
Mm. I love what you shared earlier about speaking up when you've got something to say, and it's not, and you used a bit of tone when you did it. It's not to say I've got an opinion or whatever. I think the way that we express ourselves is very, very important, and not do it in a belligerent way. And I feel like sometimes confidence can actually come across as arrogance. So
Yeah.
love to hear your take on that. Like, how does one speak with authority and
Yep.
maintain a level of humility?
Yeah. I mean, you gotta make a joke of yourself. I'll say that much. Yeah. I mean,
Eh,
I
I'm challenging you again. I'm just
I
going to
know,
step
but it's
back
good.
and
I'm with you.
challenge. I'm saying I'm going to say, rather than making a joke of yourself, would it just be, because that's actually running yourself down, which is harmful. So, or is it about being playful?
It's being playful, definitely. I maybe led in with the make a joke of yourself maybe a bit too early before I went through my answer, but it's really I'm very happy, as I said, if you're going to go into a technical debate or a logical argument about logic or engineering or otherwise, you find in sometimes, and I've been in these situations with many other engineers who have got more grey hairs than I, and you get into this situation where you're just going toe to toe on detail upon detail of decimals and factors and different equations and reasons why and it's so uplifting when you can talk to someone in that level of detail, but have a debate that is fully based on logic and black and white, that is so technical that you're almost elevated yourself. And even I've been in those situations where other people are like, I've got no idea what you're talking about. And to have that confidence in your technical ability to have those arguments would have to be the most amazing thing as an engineer to have. And that in itself, there's nothing arrogant about that. There's nothing arrogant about having experience and knowledge about a particular topic when you're talking to someone that has a similar level or a level of understanding about a particular topic. Now, I think when you're talking to someone that might not have all that technical competence, that's when I find you have to change your language. You have
I'm
to
gonna,
change how you.
I'm gonna jump in again.
Please, please.
You've invited me here for a reason.
Come
Um,
on.
you're like, bring it. So I will.
I haven't
So
finished yet though, but yeah.
that's fine. But otherwise I won't get a chance to say
No,
what
go on. Yeah, because I talk a lot.
otherwise we're not expressing. So you've talked a lot about the head and logic, and you talked about going toe to toe. My experience has been that the more we go into conviction and knowledge and sharing our technical stuff and logic and all of that sort of stuff, that is essentially a head to head, right? We're having a conversation which is your head v someone else's head. And we jokingly in the past have called you an engineer with heart, because you have got an enormous heart, which you have shown many, many times, and you show so generously as you share things like this. What about an engineer's ability to bring their whole being to the equation, not just the logic in the head, but the heart with the conversation?
Yeah, so I was funnily enough getting to that.
I'm just like accelerating you to get to that point.
I know. You like make your point, Darren. I get it. No, so where I was going is that you said, how do you become across technically competent without feeling like you're arrogant? So what I'm talking about is I'm talking about the bookends, right? So you've got this bookend where you can be at that level and not be arrogant or come across arrogant because you're talking to either an audience or a person, or you're having a discussion that's highly technical, and in many forms where there is no arrogance because the conversation is so knowledge-based that there can't be any, because you're really just talking about the core knowledge. On the other bookend that you mentioned is around being able to influence. I learned about things like political influence, working in the property development space, which is like blew my mind. Then you've also got, I might even not even have the best answer or the right answer, or even I might not even have something that might be number 3 on the list, but it might be someone else's answer, or the ability to influence people or divulge technical information in a way that sells the information, but also in a way where people go, I understand that. I use a lot of analogies, and I talk to people about things that impact on their land or their property or a neighboring property or whatever. And I think it's funny, and I'll only reflect on this, but I had a conversation with someone the other day, and I'm like, oh, look, we've got to do some works on your boundary. Say we're building a road or something, and I'm like, oh yeah, so we're going to put in a big footpath, and because of that, it just means that we just have to probably about a foot or so on your boundary, just lift up the levels and put some grass and stuff in. And they went, oh, that's because I need a 4% verge crossing. And I went, oh. And they went, oh, I'm an engineer. I was like, oh, cool. And he's like, oh, can you send me your longitudinal grading plans for your road? And I'd like to have a look at my driveway crossover grade, just to make sure I can get my car in. Will it be less than 8%? I'm like, oh. But where I'm going on the flip side is that there was, the other landowners, and they're like, oh, just a foot? Oh, yeah, that sounds cool. Will you put my fence back? Yeah, 100%, bro. Yeah, no worries. And then, there's no bravado or arrogance about that. it's the same outcome, but I think you've got to understand your audience. And I think what I see sometimes is you get people who are just like, this is the thing and this is why and whatever. And everyone's just like, well, like, I think you've got to understand that audience before you put a position like you're talking about out there. And I think if you understand that, then I couldn't see how you maybe, well, I mean, arrogance is really in the eye of the beholder, right? But I think that's probably how I'd approach that, because if you can understand your audience, maybe their drivers as well, coming back to opinions and perspective. Um, if you know who you're talking to, I think you can be technical, um, but also use your own influence and communication powers to get the outcome that you're looking for.
Mm. The outcome that serves everybody.
Yeah, the best for project, or the best
That's
for client.
true outcome. And you know this. I'm just being more explicit for the people who aren't aware of that.
Yeah,
The outcome, the true outcome, is one that supports all equally, where people aren't compromising.
that's right.
I'm just going to jump on the word boundaries because it seems like a good topic, given that I'm a coach and, obviously, well, not obviously, but my experience with working with engineers in particular are you work very, very hard, and often, engineers can be on sites and away from family and friends and all that sort of stuff. What are some of the lessons you've learned along the way about having appropriate boundaries for your personal well-being?
Yeah, it's I talk about this all the time with a lot of people. Boundaries is everything. Particularly, I think in engineering and consultancy. I mean, consultancy world or development world, infrastructure world, construction world. It is like it's on the clock all the time. You are go, 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 go. There's never a minute that you can stop. So back to, as I mentioned, slowing down. I can do a lot in a day. I can do 100 emails, 20, 30 phone calls, a couple of meetings, a coffee, lunch, but I'll still get time to, maybe ring my wife, or I'll still get time to get home on time to see my kids. And I think setting those boundaries is important with your time. When I was a young engineer, I used to try and say yes to everything. I just say yes all the time. But I had a whiteboard next to my desk, a little whiteboard. It was on my cubicle, and I'd have like the 5 or 6 things I was doing in the order that I was doing them. That was it. And I always tell this story because my boss came over and he'd be like, "Oh, Darren, I need you to do this thing." And I'm like, "Oh, that sounds great. Yes, I'll totally do it. But can you tell me where it fits on this list?" And he'd go, "Oh, yeah. Oh, no, you're too busy. I need all that now. I'll go get someone else to do it." And I was like, ah. And I
Very
sort of realized you can set your boundaries and you can say yes with a caveat. Because sometimes you go, "Oh, actually, you know what? That I can wait for, or this I can wait for. Can you jump on that?" Yes, 100%. Just tell me what you want and what priority. I think the other thing too is, particularly young engineers and good ones, if you just keep saying yes, you're just going to get overloaded. Because as a manager, if someone's saying yes, you just give them more. And if they say yes, just give more and more and more. Setting your boundaries is critical. Saying yes with a caveat. Because a lot of people say no. I was like, "Oh, I got to say no." There's a big say no culture. I've got to protect my time. Say no, say no. And I'm like, no, no, no. I'm like, say yes. Because if you keep saying no, then people will stop coming to you, and they won't come to you anymore because you always say no. And then they might have something that might be the most life-changing, career-defining project that you wouldn't even know is there. And they won't come to you because they give it to the person that says yes with a caveat.
Mm. I love that, what you say, and I love the idea of the whiteboard. That's very intelligent and
Yeah,
wise.
we've got like, I mean, it's all on the internet now. So there's a Microsoft program called Tasks. It's really cool. It's like a Kanban basically, but yeah, I mean, you open up one of them, and I already know before I give someone something, I can read it and go, "Oh, no, I won't give it to them because I'll let them get through what they're doing." But a lot of the time, you don't have that luxury. But I think, you really got to focus on what's important. It's family, it's friends, it's relationships. I always try to ring people back on the day, always, even if it's 6 o'clock or, I've had some time with the kids and they're having a chill out after dinner. I'll just ring them back or text them if I can't. And I always try to get back to people because you just don't know. Like, I've had it where people are ringing up and they just wanted to chat,
Yep.
or, their dog died or something. I don't know. You
Yeah.
just, those relationships are everything in business.
Yeah. And as well as that, what about health and well-being? What do you do?
Oh,
How do you that?
exercise.
Yeah. How do you
Yeah, exercise every day. Try and get 2, 3 liters of water. I don't eat a lot, funnily enough, which is weird.
I don't
Like I,
think you
I I love eating. I'm a big eater, right? I'll go out and have, great dinners and everything. But I just find like I think as I get older, maybe it's a getting older thing. I don't eat a lot. So I just try and keep light that way. I keep active, play golf. I don't, I don't sit down much at the office. I usually stand up desk the whole time. Keeps me moving, walking around on the phone. I love that. But yeah, the well-being part is really important.
have you always been that way, or have you come to that realization over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I tell a story. I got stressed pretty bad a few years back. Oh, it's actually a long time now, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. Excuse me. And yeah, I mean, it was pretty bad. I had to take time off work, and I think the biggest thing about stress and well-being, and what I think a lot of people have, which is commonly now known as mental load, um, is you have to come to the realization that if you're working with someone and you say, hey, look, had a bit of a delay, it's going to take us a bit more time, it's an extra couple of days, and they blow their mind like that's the worst thing that could ever happen, and it's like, the world's going to end, that's the wrong client to work with, or that's the wrong person to work with. Setting expectation and expectation management is probably the biggest thing anyone needs to learn as an engineer or a professional.
Just going to chime in there if I may. I've just spotted
Jump
on.
in.
So, in terms of, is it the wrong person to work with, or is it that that person at that moment didn't have capacity and they just became very reactive?
Or again, there is a level of expectation management. And I think if you said, on Monday, you'll have it on Friday, on Tuesday, you'll have it on Friday, on Thursday, you have it on Friday, and then on Friday at 4 o'clock, you're like, oh, hey, it's going to be next Friday. That's an expectation management thing. Um, I
It's
guess
just
where I'm going is,
isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, I guess where I'm going about that statement is um, trying to reframe what we do, and like I always say things like, is someone going to die if I don't get you a report on a Friday? Or if you don't make that submission date, like, is it really the end of the world? And trying to reframe that, like, work should be fun. Um, Learning should be fun. You should have a relationship where, you know, and openly, I always say that if someone says like, oh yeah, a couple of days, it's not really going to matter, or a day or a Monday, like, because a lot of time, like, it happens, right? Something comes up, you had something with your kids, you had something due, your inbox got full, you had to go to the school, and then you didn't get enough time. And then you're like, oh my God, I've made these commitments and I need to make these commitments. And if you go back to those and say, hey, look, I'm really sorry, I've had a bunch of stuff come in the way, can it wait a day or two? You hope that people would have the humility to be like, yeah, yeah, like, of course, like, what's a day? What's in a day? I think a lot of people get caught up in that. And I think as young engineers and young professionals, I think you need to always like almost ground yourself and know that if if you're going to be a bit late, just put it out there. Hey, boss, look, I can't make that deliverable. I'll be upfront. I'm too busy. Like I said, yes, with the caveat. Um,
Or I underestimated how long it would take to do.
100%.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
I would
Doesn't
so prefer that. I had
I
that
want to give
situation.
I want to deliver it with the the care that it takes and the um so I deliver a quality product.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, or hey, it's nearly finished, but I want to make sure it's 100%. I have a bit of extra time. But I think that comes back to well-being. That's, I think when I talked maybe before about the joking around or playfulness, I think that's so important in business. And, you know, everyone will have their in jokes or you laugh about something that happened on a job. And I think a lot of the time, and maybe it's an engineering thing, but we always whinge about the job that was the worst one, or that situation or that thing that happened. And I think it's important to tell those stories, because I think it's those stories that allow that attitude of, you know, we're doing cool things and this is fun, and it's not just like grind, grind, grind. Because I see engineers get burnt out all the time, and it's so easy. I've seen engineers do all-nighters because of the deadline. um, you know, Even now, I know of engineers that are doing all-nighters. I heard someone was sleeping in the office of another engineering company, which is like scares me. People getting like that sort of thing, even working till 10 or 11 o'clock at night with no overtime. I mean, as an industry, like that's just got to stop. It just has to stop. Like we have to change, and we have to change fast, because it's just not on. Because yeah, people will they'll burn out or commit suicide, or whatever. It's scary. And
Yeah,
I
and
think as an industry that needs to change.
yeah, I think as a planet that needs to change because
Yeah,
it's across the
I
board, isn't it?
know. It
And the
is.
rising instances of mental health issues and all of that stuff. Loneliness as a thing because people feel like
Yep.
they talk to other people about what's really going on.
Not
People
connected. Yep.
the imposter syndrome because people might catch them out on doing something or that they're pretending to be something they're not, and they're worried that they'll get caught out for that because they can't be real. All of those things. We've lost our
Yep.
we've lost our sense of heart and humanity. So that's a big thing. And it will be awesome. I know you and I have talked about this a lot in the past, how you want to try and change the stereotype of what engineers are. So obviously entrepreneurialism is a really big way in which you're doing that, the entrepreneurial engineer.
Yep.
You're not just propeller heads with your pocket protectors in the side. And hopefully I'm not offending people when I say
No.
that. I've got some of my dearest friends are engineers, and the father of my children is an engineer. So
Yep.
it's funny how many people you meet and they're like, oh, I'm not the typical engineer. I feel like I've met enough engineers who've said I'm not the typical engineer for us to say there is not a typical engineer. There's a stereotype that we can choose to perpetuate, or we can actually say, no, that's not true about us, because we all have a heart, don't we?
100%. It's about changing the stereotype, but changing and shaping our future, with AI, tech, machine learning, robots. It's happening now. Everyone's just like, oh, that's just a later thing. I'm like, no, I think we need to recraft the narrative around what an engineer is, and we need to do it quick smart, because our personal brand has been eroded.
Yeah. Well, the way I see AI is that it's a tool, it's another bit of data or a tool to support you. And
Yep.
then actually the engineer or whatever professional it is actually basically the leader of that tool. So that means we need to get the meta skills as professionals to actually be able to lead the AI. Otherwise, we'll basically become redundant if we're just doing on the tools, if you like. What's your
Yeah.
perspective?
Oh, look, I could talk about this for another hour, and I've got so many thoughts on it. But the one thing that has been repetitive in my thought on it and the conversations I've had is around coming back to what we talked about following the standard, or the logic and the engineering. When the machine learning gets to the point where not only can it design, but it can check its design and then give the author multiple options around the best outcome for that particular input, or project or design or whatever that is, it's going to be up to us to pick and choose and determined, because it will say, here's the best 5 and here's the reasons. That one's the cheapest. This one's the best sustainability. This one has all of the best of all the input data and metrics. Someone will have to go, that one. And off the back of that, what I think is that it will lead to a point where we won't be able to drive innovation, because the rules and the standards and codes that are input into the machine will have, you've got to have this, you've got to have that, you've got to have this, you've got to have that. And at no point will someone go in and be like, well, you know what? Maybe we could change this thing. And that would change everything. So that critical thinking, I believe, that's what we need to be investing in with our future engineers, to challenge the status quo, to challenge the code, to challenge everything. Otherwise, the person who's picking that item on a list, well, they'll just be made redundant too, because you'll get other robot that will come in and just pick the best one and do it.
Yeah. Well, AI can almost, I think they can do build things that can blow up humanity. It's on the verge of doing that at the moment. So
yeah, I'm not so worried about the doomsday. I don't think that, well, who knows? But all I know is that everyone that's throwing something at me like, oh, but, we'll still be out there like, supervising the robots. I'm like, no, we won't. There'll be supervisor robots. And they're like, oh, well, who's going to check the robots? I'm like, the robot checker guy robot. Like, it will just go on and on and on, right? And there'll be specialist machines for specialist roles. But anyway, I talk about that stuff too much.
Talk about that forever.
Yeah, probably needs a separate episode.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. It's cool as always chatting to you. We could talk for hours, couldn't we?
We certainly could. I very much enjoy it.
Yeah, me too. I feel like feels like it's, unless we open up another hour, I feel like that's complete.
Look, we probably need a second session, but no, I'm really good. I honestly, I got a lot out of that. I've even got some little notes here. Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I really appreciate you jumping in and challenging, because that's how we can segue to some of the responses. And yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. We always like that about each other. It's always interesting to hear your take on how things are, and I love hearing how you're helping to change or transform a profession. It's very cool to see.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Terri. Appreciate it.
Welcome. See you soon.
See ya.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed that podcast. Please like and subscribe. It helps us reach so many more aspiring engineering professionals and entrepreneurs. You can find us on LinkedIn, Spotify, and YouTube.